Hello and welcome everybody. This is Taco Movie Talks. I am brought to you here with Ethan, aka Film Junkie, and you should know him very well by now, as he is an esteemed guest of Taco Movie Talks and has a YouTube channel of his own that you should check out. It is in the description below. It is Film Junkie on YouTube, and also check out his and my letterbox. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be one of the more disturbing themed episodes, and the theme, I guess you could say, Ethan, new French extremity. Would you? Yeah. It's always been a type of film movement, I guess, that was intriguing to me, and I think Martyrs, which is one of the films we're going to be talking about, is the first film within this movement that I heard about, and also the first that I saw. How about you, Ethan? What was the first you saw, and how did you hear about it?
Well, so I think I should mention briefly, if I could, that we were originally going to do Bodies, 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 and Martyrs as a polarizing horror film episode. And I was like, I also mentioned I think I mentioned Irreversible to you as well, as like a sort of polarizing, because I think that the French extremity movement in and of itself is a very polarizing genre of film, like a very polarizing movement, because it's so uncomfortable with some of these movies. Like both of these movies that we're talking about are very uncomfortable to watch, and I got introduced to it through Gaspar Noé has been such a weird filmmaker to me, because he's always intrigued me with some of his work, but I've never really fully liked his work. I watched Climax. I think that was the first technically French extremity film that I watched, and I thought it was very good. It was just very bizarre, and I didn't really understand it. And then I heard about Irreversible being one of, if not his best movie, and so I watched it, and I hated it. I thought it was not good at all. Um, and but rewatching it, I think both of these movies have encouraged me to rewatch them both in recent memory, and they have both changed as far as my perspective goes. So we'll get deeper into that as we go along, though.
Yeah, I think there's talent that you can see in both of these films, but it is very offensive, and I think it's almost a choice to really push certain scenes, push violence, push sexual acts as well, and just really lean into the obscene. And Martyrs is really high level violence, and Irreversible is violence and just there's so much sexual activity that it is like it's a whirlwind. Everything about that movie is there's a take that you can have from it, but I guess as Climax goes, would you say you are going to be encouraged to give it a second watch after watching these again?
Maybe. I was actually very intrigued by Noé's newest movie, which is Vortex. It
Okay.
seems like a very, very interesting film because it seemed like a very personal film for Noé. That subject matter that it involved Vortex, he had delved into quite a bit in his life. I mean, I think a couple of his family members suffered the same thing, and he even suffered the same thing himself.
Oh
So
wow.
like, and so I've been intrigued by that film. But actually, the first Gaspar Noé movie I heard about was Love. Um, yeah, we don't have to say anything else about that, but
So, yeah, I was actually very close. Like I even had started the movie of oh jeez, we were just talking about it. It slipped my mind.
oh,
The the
Irreversible.
the dance one by Gaspar Noé.
Oh, Climax,
Climax.
Climax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to watch it and I had it downloaded, but I didn't download the subtitles for it. So ended up
Mm.
going a different direction. That was like a couple months ago. In comparison to Irreversible, is it, I guess, as hard a movie to watch?
Well, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I think Irreversible is just him. I mean, do you want to talk about Irreversible first? Just like ease on into Irreversible before we talk about comparing it to his other movies?
Sure. Yeah. Would you like to give, I guess, a quick little summary of Irreversible?
Yeah, sure. So Irreversible is basically about a story of a horrific, violent act occurred on a innocent girl. That it's a story that's told in reverse. So all the event, it's like Memento,
Yes.
except very, very hard to watch.
Exactly. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah.
But in the writing, and I guess I'm gonna do a compliment sandwich here. In that, writing was awesome. Really liked the writing. It was clearly trying to be really push the bounds of even cinematography. Like the camera movement was dizzying. It was. Did that kind of, from your perspective, did you think that it was necessary to do it that much? And I guess like that much movement, I guess.
I feel like it was necessary for Noé's goals, which is to make you hate the movie. Um,
Mission accomplished and
yes.
with that.
Oh gosh, when I first watched it, I was done with it already after that. It was so hard to watch just for that. And
Yeah.
then the scene happens and that's hard to watch. It's crazy.
Okay, so you cannot talk about Irreversible if you don't talk about there is an SA scene that is it is probably the worst in cinematic history. If there is a worse scene, I haven't seen it and I haven't heard about it.
Yeah.
It
That was kind of Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go.
Oh, so I was going to talk about it because there's a great review about Gaspar Noé and his work by a man named Carson Runquist, who I follow regularly on YouTube. I enjoy his essays and his reviews.
Shout out
But he
to
talked
him.
about Gaspar Noé. Yes, absolutely. He's not going to hear this though. Absolutely. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. Um, so he was talking about the opening the Cannes Film Festival and when Irreversible was at Cannes, and it caused so many walkouts. It's one of the most infamous Cannes screenings I think ever. It's just but I think Noé wants that, and so he puts these things in the film that are so violent and realistic that it's shocking.
Yeah, so I did hear this film. It's one of the most polarizing, like you said, was
Yeah.
up for the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in 2002, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and was reviewed by Roger Ebert and said this is one that the majority of audiences are going to not be able to stomach.
Yeah.
And I have a pretty high tolerance when it comes to, disturbing, disgusting, gory
Yeah.
films. And like, I kid you not,
Yeah.
my feet went numb during that scene.
Oh
Like,
God.
it that was so brutal and so long that I was just like,
Yeah.
when is this gonna stop? And
Yeah.
but even going a step further, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Ethan, but there was a few scenes where you're like, it was just frustrating you, I feel
Oh
like.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I wanted to talk about what you said for how long it was, the lingerance of it. That
Yes.
is, I think, the key factor into making it so brutal. Like, he holds on it for what seems like 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it. I don't know how long, I don't remember how long it was, but it just felt like a long time. And it was just so uncomfortable and hard to watch. He never cuts away from it, ever.
Yeah.
That's the key factor to me, is just holding on the scene.
Mm-hmm. And there's little details to the scene too. It takes place in an underpass, and there is a moment where in the background a male character, faceless, nameless, actually walks, sees what is unfolding, and then turns around. Did you pick up on that, Ethan?
Yes, there was one guy who was there and he just didn't do anything.
Which adds even further. I mean, it's a scene that it kind of angers you to watch. And I mean, I think that is what Gaspar Noé is going to, that it's like, sickening stuff like this does happen and
Yeah.
you can't take it back. These events are set in motion by, it's just, anyone could be afflicted by this. And it's really letting you into how terrible a crime this is, from my
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, which makes it not a good movie necessarily, at least in my opinion, but
Mm-hmm.
it makes for an interesting focal point to talk about when referencing when talking about Gaspar Noé, because he is, I think, one of the more fascinating people in the film industry.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to get your take before kind of diving in deeper to some of the elements I really did like about this film.
Hmm.
Because this is the only Noé film I've seen so far, but
Yes.
watching more of his filmography, do you think that some of the talent that's shown in this gets more spotlight in some of his other films?
Um. Well, I definitely wanted to mention Irreversible in comparison to his other films. I've only seen one other Noé film, and it's Climax.
Hmm.
But in comparison, no. To answer your question earlier, no, it is definitely not. Climax is not nearly as rough as Irreversible is.
Hmm.
It's just an insanely trippy movie and
Okay.
a very weirdly. It's very lingering, like Irreversible, but instead of focusing on, it's disturbing, but in a different way, not in a shocking, realistic way, but in a very psychedelic way.
Well, that is a relief to me. So I'm definitely going to try to watch Climax here in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, Irreversible is the only film of his that's like is about like the outright violence, whereas the rest is just kind of just examining other types of those weird psychedelic trippy moments. Like Love, it's sex. With Climax, it's like high. With Vortex, it's death. But with Irreversible, it's violence, and so that makes it very hard to watch.
Yeah. Well, I do have to say, from an artistic standpoint, that is a neat way to kind of separate films and have a theme for each and a goal going into each. And I like the idea of that, and that is something that I definitely want to explore.
Yeah, I can't respect him too much for it, but rewatching Irreversible and understanding kind of where Noe is coming from made me kind of respect Irreversible just a bit more.
Yeah, because I don't think it is. My perspective is I don't think it's exploitative. And what's your take on that, Ethan?
Um, no, I don't think it's exploitative because it's the whole kind of the crux of the film is the violence. The violence is kind of used as a jumping off point for discussion and what Gaspar Noé is ultimately trying to get you to do.
And what do you think his intention was? How do you think you think he wanted people to walk out of the film, or
Oh,
what?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the posters for Climax is "You despised Irreversible. You were disgusted by Enter the Void." It's like that.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's written all over him that he wants you to hate his movies. He wants you to get that reaction so bad because it causes discussion and it causes attention.
So would you say he's a provocateur, and that maybe he kind of fits into the camp of like a Von Trier-esque director?
Yeah, except Von Trier, I feel like that attention is there for a reason. I watched a couple of Von Trier movies, like Dancer in the Dark and Breaking the Waves. I thought those movies were interesting in the sense that they were trying to. Von Trier's movies are less brutally violent as they are just brutally depressing. I mean, just so much depressing stuff goes on in Dancer in the Dark, especially. I had to go back to the movie theater and watch Licorice Pizza a second time in order to get over Dancer in the Dark. That's how brutal that movie was. But no, I think they're two different sides of the coin as far as how far they're willing to go as far as affecting your emotions.
Yeah. So, I had mentioned No Way. I thought from a script standpoint, and I think the acting too, you could say, were some of the standouts. I did like the direction to go reverse order. I liked how there was multiple callbacks in doing that. And I also, I think Vincent Castle was spectacular, even though there was scenes where he was kind of supposed to be annoying on purpose. He did that even well.
Yeah.
So that was the bright spot. I thought the script was enough where I'm like, okay, like I give this film the benefit of the doubt. There's clearly talent behind it, but the the intentional, I guess, annoyance, for lack of a better term, where scenes just seem to be kind of trying to poke at the viewer and, you know, almost encourage them, like you said, to leave, which made this feel like the longest hour and a half movie I've ever seen in my life. And the camera motion was just, I mean, it was literally like, it felt like you could get seasickness or motion sickness just from watching this film.
Totally. One thing I would comment on is the score. Mm-hmm. The score is, I think the score is definitely one of the highlights. It's very dark and haunting.
Yes.
In a very no way, but it doesn't feel annoying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it that and some of the camera motion, like when Castle and the ex-boyfriend notice that they know the girl who is being put onto the ambulance, there is something about that, like 2 to 3 seconds, where he captured a feeling, an emotion that almost kind of puts you into the shoes of those characters. And like that type of being able to capture that feel is pretty damn special as far as I'm concerned. Do you know, like that kind of moment where it almost like there was a literal flash, I think. And it's like that was the shock that I think any person would feel during that time.
Oh yeah, totally. But there is one moment that I also want to touch on that is almost just as brutal as the R scene, the SA scene, and it's where Vincent Cassel and his friends try to go confront the guy who supposedly SA'd his girlfriend and like really wounded her. And when he goes there, this guy is about to like stick his member into his friend, into Vincent Cassel, and his friend takes like a fire extinguisher and beats him in the head with it until like his face is horribly disfigured. I mean, he's dead.
Yes.
He's so dead. That was really disturbing.
That was yeah, I mean, you know what you're getting into after seeing that. Because, well, first of all, them getting to there, I mean, they go to a homosexual bar, or gay club, whichever, you prefer to call it. And I mean, there is very, very graphic, like sexual scenes being displayed. And then they just go from like almost aggressive, in your face sexuality to just so dark, gritty, and unflinching violence that it's shocking. And I wouldn't be surprised if at Cannes this maybe got a few people to leave, and then by the end, I feel like, a lot of the audience,
10 people left.
Jeez. Yeah, that was really, to me, that scene, I think there is something to be said about that, though, Ethan, and I want to get your take. Yeah. The fact that almost seeing a man like beaten to death as opposed to a woman like beaten badly, the woman getting beaten affected me more. And I mean it's a cultural thing. In most places, I think that you're gonna sympathize more with a woman because it's just a part of our cultural, just there's a red line that it's not acceptable to cross, and that is to, put your hands on a woman to that extent, especially.
Yeah. Well, I think because it really lends to the SA scene because it really like makes you sympathize with these like why did these characters just brutally murder this guy with a fire extinguisher? And was that even the right guy? I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if
I
that was the
don't
right
think it
guy.
was, because I think he was the friend of the dude with the nose band-aid, and that was like the only way that you could like point him out from that scene of the essay. So the guy who perishes is not the one who committed the act. He just happens to kind of get caught in the crossfires.
Yeah, even though he's also a horrible, horrible person.
Yes, yeah, that is true. I mean, I guess it does go to show that he is just as bad as his friend, but it also everyone loses essentially.
Pretty much.
Everyone loses. Because I would be, what I take away from this is there's a future mother who now has like this terrible trauma to live with and try to deal with while bringing another life into this world.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. And that might have impacted the pregnancy as well. Castle's arm is broken. He has to. I don't know if he would go to jail. Do you think he would go to jail?
It was technically his friend who brutally murdered that guy, but that was kind of in self-defense.
True.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, either way, I mean, you get your arm broken and then your girlfriend is, terribly assaulted. That is, you lose. The guy's going to go to jail for murder. He loses. The one guy dies, and then the other guy, I would assume, will be caught and then will go to prison as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like a tragedy of human emotion that you can't help but like feel awful about the whole thing, and I think that's the point. He's bringing all these human emotions and these characters together to make you just despise the entire journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the most relatable characters maybe is the ex-boyfriend, and we get kind of introduced to him as the one who commits like the maybe debatably the most terrible act of all. Although I would maybe argue the essay was worse, but it's, I mean, you could debate it, I guess, but still, that's how we're introduced, and that's before we even really know the inspiration or what led up to that moment.
Yeah.
Overall, this was one of the toughest films to watch.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Even after the scene near the end, I was like, I wanted to be done with the film after that. I was.
Yeah.
It definitely takes. It calms down a lot after that. But I'm just like, you have such a terrible taste in your mouth after that you just don't want to watch even like kind of happier, more upbeat scenes to follow. I was just like, I want to be done with this.
Correct, especially after you realize that happened, that all the nice moments are all before everything goes crashing down.
Exactly. So it's like you can't even really enjoy them because you know where it leads.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I liked is, there was some quotable moments that I guess, literal quotes from the movie that tie into maybe some of the themes that were trying to be explored. I think the famous one is and I might slightly misquote this, but it's time destroys all things.
Yeah, it destroys all good things, that's for sure.
Yeah. I wonder if that is... I think that's just pure commentary on the movie, and in that, like we were talking about, the ending scenes, you really can't appreciate them because you know what happens after them. It kind of works on that level, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
But it
then,
also destroys your sense of like normality, it almost feels like, because the whole thing just goes, it's such a brutally violent series of acts done completely in reverse.
yeah,
So it like almost destroys your sense of normality with that.
yeah. Then and then it's like there is kind of this philosophy that everything that happens is kind of preordained, or it's set in motion well before it actually happens, which you could see, I guess, both sides of the coin, where it's like, you know, this leads to this, leads to this. His, like, Castle's actions push his girlfriend away, leads her to being in a vulnerable situation. Her not having her ex-boyfriend accompany her kind of leads to her also being isolated. But also, there is one very specific moment where someone says, take the underpass, it's much safer, where had that not convinced her to go or not happened, maybe none of this occurs.
Yeah.
So
Which is, yeah, it's like a string of events
exactly.
that make this happen.
And it's like, had any of these coin flips kind of gone the other way, it could have, you know, led to a completely different line of events. So it's like, you can, in my eyes, you can kind of see that it's like every random act kind of leads to another random act.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the butterfly effect in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ethan, I would like to get your rating and any other final thoughts on this movie.
Well, originally, when I first watched the movie, I gave it a 3 out of 10.
Okay.
A 1.5 out of 5. But in like learning about Noé, rewatching it, and getting this discussion, I feel like it's not a good movie, but it's a very, very fascinating point in film history, and an interesting but still hard to watch experience. So I bump it all the way up to a 6 out of 10. 3 out of 5.
So you and I, we landed at the same point. I gave this a 3 out of 5 as well. And I think it is because you can see some talent, but major, I guess, detraction is the camera work and how it lingers on stuff that's supposed to upset you. I get that is the intention, and he did it well, but it's like,
Can't really respect it.
Yeah.
You can't respect it that much.
yeah,
But it definitely lends an interesting experience to it, which is why I give it a more positive rating, unlike the next movie.
I'm excited to talk about that. Also, I would say I would not recommend this film unless it is just, it leads to good discussion. Like, it's something that I think you can talk about this film with anyone who's seen it, but I don't know if for a lot of people, the juice will be worth the squeeze, just because it is really, truly, and I can't understate this or overstate this enough. It's one of the most upsetting films you will ever watch.
Absolutely.
As is this next film, and that is Martyrs by Pascal Lugier. This is 2008 in which this film came out. To sum this up, and this is kind of, I guess, getting into spoiler territory, although I feel like you can watch this with this knowledge and it's not going to really ruin it for you, because it's like if you're a fan of Hostel and like you're seeking to watch something that pushes the boundaries of violence, this is, I think, a reason a lot of people watch it. But anywho, there is kind of an underground religious sect or kind of cult, for lack of a better term, that is seeking to create martyrs. And that is people who kind of see the void between life and death. They get to see into the afterlife while still living. So they torture primarily women because they have been proven to successfully see this. And one of our main characters was, tortured as a young lady, goes on to find the family who committed these offenses against her and just absolutely obliterates the whole family. And her friend, who she met in an orphanage, kind of cleans up the mess for her before she takes her own life and then becomes a martyr in the end. And then there is, I guess, a twist at the end that we can, divulge into with some discussion. But let me get your initial take on this one, Ethan.
Well, I want to start by saying two quick things, though. One is that I'm glad we did Irreversible and Martyrs in hindsight, because they are more cut from the same cloth than if we were to do Bodies. So I think Irreversible is a better choice. And two, I'm probably going to be also mentioning a couple of times the Sardonicast episode with Moist Critical, where they talked about Martyrs, because they liked the movie, but one of them did not. And I want to address that as well a couple of times throughout this. But yeah, I very much dislike this movie. I'm just gonna hit people with the cold water here.
So this was a film that I rated positively, not super positively as well. I gave it, I guess, just to cut to the end first and then work our way backwards, I guess. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I'm going to sound very, very hypocritical in that what it did to make you uncomfortable, I think, landed, but it worked towards whatever story they were trying to tell. And could they have done it better? Yes, because I'll just say one of the scenes, there was a man who was just punching one of the women. That scene was the most disturbing scene to me in this one. Even more so than the filleting scene. Did you have, I guess, and I think there might be even one more scene that was the most disturbing, and that was when the one who was originally abused, that first twist is unveiled and she takes her life. That one I think was the most disturbing.
Yeah.
What did you think, Ethan?
So here's the thing. To me, there is a big distinction between the violence of the film and the actual story, the themes, the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the violence is so bad that it distracts you from the meaning. And to be like, in the Sargana Cast episode, they mentioned that um, people, the person who didn't like the film, said that one of the people who liked it said to the person who didn't like it, said, um, "You're kind of looking at it from a perspective of a horror movie when it's more than that." And I agree in essence, but the thing is, the horror is so the gore, I should say, the violence is so bad that it distracts you from that meaning. I think that's maybe my biggest criticism with it, and it's a big one. I don't like over the top violence for where it feels like it had no purpose. Do you think it had a purpose in any way?
I I'm more of the I would say I think it there was, but I also can see the perspective that it could have been used as like a marketing tool.
Hmm.
From a story standpoint, I think it was to show how how driven the cult was, like how like singularly focused they were, to where they were committing these atrocities with one goal in mind, and it completely blinded anyone to what they were doing. So it's like
Yeah.
we look at it and our perspective is they're doing this and it's bull, like,
Yes.
so we're like, how the heck could you do this? But they are like, they truly believe. And I don't know if, for lack of a better term, it might be a criticism on religion as a whole, in that it's like, if you do this in the name of your religious purpose, it doesn't kind of justify the action.
Yeah. I think if there's one thing this film gets right to me, it's that angle. It's this cult and their drive is very like you don't really understand it until the end and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It does in fact make sense. Um where the film dives off for me is the fact that you feel I feel nothing for these characters. Again, it felt like a tragedy, but it's almost like it doesn't want you to make it feel like the whole situation is a tragedy, but it never really feels like it wants you to think that the whole situation is a tragedy. It wants you to focus on this one element of the film, whereas the film is so violent and visceral. It's like almost Cannibal Holocaust levels, if you ever heard of Cannibal Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, it doesn't stoop down to that, which is like one of my least favorite films ever, Cannibal Holocaust. But it is very distracting.
I think, and I will definitely concede to the fact that it's a less is more probably would have benefited this movie.
Yes, which is what Irreversible was, a less is more situation.
Yes, where I mean, honestly, there's two very violent scenes that just stand out immediately,
Mhm.
whereas in this film, by the end, and I think it was trying to build up to the last violent act being like shocking. It honestly, it was like not, because of
Yeah.
everything you had to
Yeah.
endure before you got there.
Yeah. I could definitely see the why people enjoy the sort of like the very violent nature of the film, in conjunction with this interesting thing. I just don't like it when it's separate like that. It just feels so distinct from each
Mm-hmm.
other. Another movie, one movie that is so brutal with its violence and so visceral in its depiction of its source material is City of God, directed by Fernando Medel. One of my all-time favorite movies, and because the violence had a purpose and it showed such a ridiculously realistic and visceral depiction of these Brazilian slums, and the way they go about it is so invigorating and engrossing, but also interesting.
Yeah. That is a film that's on my watch list. I'm glad you recommend it. So I'm definitely gonna have to push that up even further. But like you said, it started to lose some of the value at the beginning. I think like the the gore, the grotesque gore, was very very impactful. We
Mhm.
like the shotgun scene is super duper impactful. Then even like the metal blindfold scene where it's like bracketed into the one woman's skull, but you can only kind of hit the same note so many times before it all starts to sound like nothing.
Ah.
One thing I will say, and I think you kind of agreed with this, is that a premise, as far as the premise goes, it is a very intriguing premise.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't watch the American version. I'm not sure if you have,
Oh
Ethan.
no. No, from what I've heard, they seem to be quite terrible.
Yeah,
So I'm just probably not going to bother.
yeah, and I don't think I will either. I feel like they probably could have taken this though and you know expanded upon it in the right direction and
Mhm.
worked more on a premise basis. But what I am thinking is they used the name value and was like, and this is just, I don't know this for 100%, just from what I've heard and just trying to extrapolate, is probably they're like, hey, look, Hostel did well. If we just make a quote unquote torture porn, people will watch this movie and maybe like it. So, would you categorize this film though as torture porn in your mind?
No, because it definitely goes beneath the waves a little bit as far as like its themes, whereas torture porn is just like torture for the sake of torture. Literally, that's it.
Yeah.
And it can make for some decent movies like Saw.
Yes.
Saw is torture porn, but it's a little less trashy and a little more interesting as far as like a mystery movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a mystery, but it's very much a torture porn.
Mm-hmm.
Hostel's probably I have never seen Hostel, but if I had to guess, it's probably just torture for the sake of torture and nothing else. But Martyrs came out at a time period where stuff like that was very popular, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So to eh, to in a sense recreate that gut wrenching experience, but also lending an aspect of thematics, as far as like scientific themes or religious themes. I think that was what they're going for. I just think the alchemy wasn't in their favor.
That is definitely understandable. I want to point out one, I guess, other aspect, and it's kind of to the structure of the film, and get your take on it. One thing that I kind of appreciated, or I did appreciate, I would say, is how the front end of the film, it came off kind of like a ghost story. And then the second half almost changes in the way that, I mean, it's not so much a ghost story with a twist. It is, in fact, kind of starts to follow the true narrative of what sets the, quote unquote ghost story in motion. Did you kind of like how the front and back end differed from one another in that way?
Yeah, it is an interesting angle. Um, uh, another thing that I very much dislike about the movie is the characters. Um,
Yeah.
um, I know I'm gonna sound mean, but it has, well, I mean, at least for the first half, it has one of the most unlikable protagonists I have ever seen in a movie. And
Yeah.
I know that's I know that's the point. I know that's the point, but the fact that you're expected to kind of sympathize with her,
Hmm.
even though she's much older than she was, it might have. I don't know. It's so weird because on one hand, I feel like such an asshole, but on the other hand, she just comes across so unlikable in this movie.
It could be kind of like you could definitely want to tear your hair out. I
The
think
fact that she killed these seemingly innocent people,
yes.
and you don't even know if they had any part in it.
Yeah.
It was in their basement, but do you know if they had any part in it? I don't know.
Yeah, that is true. And just to, I guess, contextualizing it with what we later learn about the ghost that has followed her, it does. You're like, well, she was so brought to a delusional state by her trauma
Oh
that
yeah.
she just, it is like it might not have mattered to her. And I mean, and that is, I guess, maybe trying to show the effects of what victimizing people as a part of your religion can do. It doesn't just affect them, but by affecting them, they can affect other people, where it's just like hate begets hate, and spreading out this terrible stuff into the world kind of just continues to pollute the world with violence and so on and so forth. But
Oh yeah.
I do agree with you, though. It is hard to sympathize with this character throughout the, how long she lasts in the film.
Yeah. And it's a case of setting the themes apart from the actual filmmaking. Because to me, the actual filmmaking is, simply put, mediocre. I think the sets and the look of the film can be very interesting, but I think the score sucks. I think the score is awful. I think the cinematography is nothing to like truly write home about. I like the juxtaposition of the nice looking house set against the very dark, damp torture room. I think that is interesting. But that was the sets and the lighting, not necessarily cinematography, which I thought was not good at all. And I thought the score was not good at all.
Yeah, I do have to agree with you on that. And another criticism that I would say, and I would be willing to bet this was a thought out decision, an intentional decision by the director, but our second protagonist, her torture, I had a similar feeling from what I felt in Irreversible, to where I was like, you're dragging this on just so long. It
Yes.
just continually, day after day after day. And I get that there was a point being made there. I do think there has to be a balance between, look, does it make sense to make the audience kind of sit through this? You know what I'm trying to say, Ethan? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a disconnect there. I get that there's intent behind it, but
I think
you're compromising the entertainment of the audience to do so.
yes. And I want to go to say that I was more disturbed by Irreversible. I think that was a more effective film because your mind is skewed between the themes and the violence, and it just kind of, it's not realistic and it's not interesting in my opinion.
I
The themes
agree.
are.
I completely agree. Irreversible is the most disturbing movie I've ever watched, and I will say I think Martyrs is a number 2, but yeah, I mean there's a clear distinction. Irreversible takes the cake for me, where it was like just so. And the fact of the matter is that it is rooted in realism, makes it even more disturbing.
Yeah, which is why after watching this movie for a second time, I actually respect Irreversible more.
It feels like there's actual social commentary going on in that, and there's some high intellect themes that are trying to get across. Martyrs, it does have themes, but they're more, I guess, obscure and maybe a little bit harder to feel the relevancy to or connect to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked for like about 2.5 hours on another movie about a sort of religious context, Decalogue.
Yes, which
And that was like genius level because they took real life and used the 10 Catholic commandments as the backdrop for each of the episodes of that show.
and it felt so rooted in realism that, I mean, it was just, you could easily put yourself in any of these situations, whereas as Martyrs, definitely not really at all. I mean, it's a scary prospect. That's the horror element where you're like, oh, geez, like, if I was put in this situation, this would be horrifying, right? But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, but it's almost an irrational fear to have just because of how unlikely a scenario it is. But like I said, this one was a 3 out of 5 for me. Ethan, what do you rate this? And do you have any final thoughts for Martyrs?
So, yeah. This suffered the exact opposite fate from Irreversible. I think first time watching it, I gave it a 2.5 out of 5, 5 out of 10. But rewatching it confirmed my bad feelings I have for it, and I give it a 3 out of 10, 1.5 out of 5.
And I totally respect that because you pointed out a ton of flaws with this film that I think the violence was so cranked up to kind of try to paint over some of those flaws. Do you agree?
Oh, it's fair. I could absolutely see why somebody would like this movie. No doubt about it. The fact that you like it is like, I'm glad that we can have a little bit of disagreement, so we can have a discussion about it.
Oh,
And
absolutely, me too.
I could totally see your perspective. For me, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So, Ethan, we just talked about some disturbing movies, and I wanted to go over some more disturbing movies with you. And I'm just going to roll through a list. We'll get some hot takes on these for the ones that you've seen. If you haven't seen them, just, let me know. And for the ones that you have seen, I would like to get your kind of initial thoughts. If you thought it was disturbing, if you enjoyed the movie, if you thought it was a good movie. And
Yes.
I'm going to start from the bottom of the list. This would be considered the least disturbing, and then work my way up. And as I stated, my two top ones we just talked about.
Yes.
Least disturbing, but a little bit disturbing, Mad God by Phil Tippett. Have you seen it, and how do you feel about it?
I have not, but that's been on my list for a while. I've been trying to watch it.
I totally would recommend. As far as stop motion goes, absolutely amazing. Next on the list, one that I know is right up your alley, and that I believe we have mentioned a little bit about, and that is Eraserhead by David Lynch.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite films of all time. I think it's a masterpiece. I love the theme. I love the themes, the disturbing nature of it. I just love it all. It's just a masterpiece.
I think we touched upon this in the David Lynch episode.
Yes.
It's one of the films that I think gives you this sense of dread.
Yes, absolutely.
Working from that, it is totally a very effective movie and really great in that aspect. And then this next one, it's another David Lynch film, and we went very, very in depth, and that is Inland Empire.
Inland Empire is I haven't seen it in a while. Very trippy movie. Really enjoy it. Not one of my favorite Lynch movies. I like the experimentation of it, as well as the sort of off-kilter editing, and I like the some of the really effective imagery.
Yes. Next, this is a more recent movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies, actually. It's by Ari Aster, and that is Midsommar. How do you feel about this? Did you like it as well? And do you kind of find this to be a disturbing movie as well?
Ooh, some Aster. Okay. So Hereditary is one of my favorite horror films of the last decade or so. I love that movie. Midsommar, I watched that. I personally was disappointed because there was less of a story. And I wasn't that scared.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good movie. It's just, to me, it wasn't effective in the same way Hereditary was.
I agree. From a horror aspect, I do totally agree. And I think the way that I put these on, the order for the most part is right. But I do think for these five, I got the order of disturbing wrong. But that's it's all semantics at this point. One thing I will say, Ethan, and let me know how you feel. It's such a weird thing to say because the boyfriend character in that movie is such an asshole. However, the bear scene scared the bejesus out of me because I'm like, I would never want to go that way.
It's a weird scene. It's a very, very weird and creepy scene. But I will say one thing is I think this is the one that kind of ruins it for me a little bit. Florence Pugh. I don't really like her in the movie. I don't know. I think she got the American accent, but I think my problem with her is her crying.
There is plenty of crying in that movie.
Yeah.
So
And obviously the character is crying for a reason. Obviously,
Mhm.
you have to feel bad for her, but Florence Pugh, her crying, man. It sounds again mean. It sounds mean, but I think the crying is kind of annoying and kind of silly.
I can definitely I can see your perspective on that because and this is I think what strengthens your point. You said her crying and there I can literally imagine the scenes of her crying.
Yes.
It totally takes the spotlight.
Yeah.
So
I could obviously she goes through so much tragedy and it's a very and the character is written very well.
mhm.
But the way Florence Pugh portrayed the character, I just thought was a little off.
Going into the next one, it is Room, and that is with, and I'm blanking on her name.
Brie Larson.
Yes. Have you watched that film? Do you know?
I have not. I've not seen that movie.
It's a solid film. It's disturbing. It's about kind of a woman being locked away against her will and having a child with her abductor. Pretty well
Mhm.
acted. I am the way you feel about Florence Pugh is kind of the way I feel about Brie Larson, and it's not particularly her acting, just I don't know, her personality is it doesn't mesh well with mine, but
Yeah. Yeah. She won an Oscar. Brie Larson won an Oscar for that role.
no crap. Well, she did really well in that film, and there is a lot
Yeah.
of directorial decisions, and I probably acting decisions too, especially with
Yeah.
the young actor that add to that. But that one, it's pretty subtle in the way it does it, but it still remains,
Yeah.
fairly disturbing.
Yeah,
Next
well,
one,
one of the
go
biggest
ahead.
Oscar snub. Oh, sorry, I was just going to mention one of the biggest Oscar snubs. If you're a pretentious film buff, you can't go without mentioning the fact that Toni Collette was snubbed for her role in Hereditary, which is stupid.
That one is, yeah. As far as like our generation of films, and like when I was getting heavy into films, that was one of the best performances
Oh,
ever.
absolutely. Gosh, what an incredible performance.
Next film, The Cell, with Jennifer Lopez, Vince Vaughn, and I can never pronounce his name. It's Vincent D'Onofrio, I believe is how you
Oh,
pronounce it.
Vincent D'Onofrio?
D'Onofrio, that is, yes. Have you
Yeah.
seen that film?
No, but Vincent D'Onofrio was Private Pile in Full Metal Jacket.
I just watched that film, and he is amazing in that role. He is such a good
Terrific.
actor. Oh
Terrific.
God, I love him. The Cell, I gotta recommend. It's a very different horror movie, very stylish, and makes the villain. It's kind of like. Have you seen The Black Phone? I
I
think it's
have.
called.
I did.
It's a little bit of that, but
Hmm.
I would say even it's more stylized, and
Yeah.
it's I very rarely recommend films that or Lopez is the lead of, but this is one that I will recommend.
No, what about Geely though? What about
Oh,
Geely?
I can't believe I left out that masterpiece.
Oh, Geely.
Oh,
Oh boy. Oh, Al Pacino in that movie. Gosh dang. Recently watched Dog Day Afternoon. Pales in comparison to Geely. Oh my god.
oh my, that is. I have to say, that is like I had an appreciation for Al Pacino, and then I
Hmm.
watched Dog Day Afternoon, and oh my
How
god,
wonderful.
that
I
is
rewatched it and I
so
was like,
good.
I changed it to a 10. I was like, oh, this movie is one of the best ever. Come on.
And Sidney Lumet, or is that how it's pronounced? Is he French or is it Lumet?
No, I think it's Lumet.
Lumet.
I mean, whatever you want to call it, but I call it. I think it's pronounced Lumet.
He's so damn good.
Yeah, 12 Angry Men, one of the best ever.
I have to rewatch that because I did watch it and I really liked it, but that was while I was in high school, and so that was like, that's years in the past. So
Of course.
I have to watch it again and give that a fresh rating and a fresh review. But I love that film, and to think he made that in the late 50s, and then Before the Devil Knows You're There in the 2000s.
Devil Knows You're Dead. Oh my goodness.
Yes. And like, how the hell are you that good for so many decades? It just blows my mind.
Yeah, he's super good.
Next film is The Butterfly Effect. Have you seen this? It's an Ashton Kutcher classic.
I have not, but my stepmom wanted me to watch this for so long. She loves this movie.
It's a neat premise, and the disturbing aspect is there's some violence. There's a lot of like really depressing material, and then there's one particular scene that is probably the most disturbing that throws this onto the list, and I won't spoil that for you if you do choose to watch Butterfly Effect. But
I will absolutely.
we mentioned this film previously, and that is because it is debatably, but I think a lot of people might lean towards it being the best Ari Aster film, and that is Hereditary.
Yes.
Obviously, you're a fan. How do you
A
feel?
very big fan.
How do you feel about the disturbing factor and, I guess, overall enjoyment?
Hereditary, I've gone on record saying this. Hereditary is the most disturbing horror, not the most disturbing, the most scary horror film I've ever seen.
It was proof that horror is still alive and well.
Oh gosh.
I mean, because it seemed like everyone is very quick to jump on trends, it seems, but just to have a very unique creative direction and be unscared to, because I think a lot of people, like casual audience members, were thrown off just because of how different it was, and just to stick to the principles is what I think is going to make Hereditary stand up like 20, 30 years down the line.
Yeah, the infamous scene that occurs in the first 30 minutes is probably is one of those horror moments that will stand the test of time.
Yes, absolutely. And how realistically depicted that was. He is so tremendous at just dropping these shocking moments on you, where you put yourself into the shoes and it's like, how the hell would I react? Like if I was the brother in that scenario, like it made my mind start racing. I was like, if that were me, I really don't know if I would act any differently than him, or like, I don't know how I would react.
Yeah, it's funny because my sister and my dad were watching that with me, and as soon as that scene occurred, my jaw dropped to the floor, and then my sister yelled at me saying, "What are you watching?" And my dad apparently had a nightmare from that. I was like, well, yeah, I would agree.
That's something when you can make the papa have a nightmare. That's how you know that it's horror turned up to 11.
Yeah, it's one of those perfect examples where it gently starts creeping under your skin, and I love those horror movies. Those are my favorite type of horror movies.
Yeah, that is near the top of my list. And moving on, so you will probably notice moving forward, it is not necessarily how good the film is, just purely how disturbing, because we're kind of going to bounce around between quality with these entries, although there is some pretty damn good movies still on the list, but there are some pretty not good movies, a few. This next one, have you seen the movie Sinister with Ethan Hawke?
I've not seen Sinister.
So I don't know if in good faith I could recommend it to you, but for people who have watched this movie or any entry in the series, the home footage tapes are pretty disturbing, and it is kind of horrifying in that it's like, oh my god, like in a shocking, I can't believe they showed this type feel. So
Yeah.
if the in your face kind of horror and like just grotesque violence isn't quite your speed, then I'm not sure if you would like that film.
Also, that was speaking of the Black Phone. That was directed by Scott Derrickson, director of the Black Phone, and Doctor Strange apparently.
Really? Oh wow. Okay. I did not know that. That makes
Yeah.
sense that he was able to get Ethan Hawke in both films then. Anywho, next movie. This is directed by Rob Zombie, and it is one of the films that I saw in Hollywood Video. First of all, have you ever been to a Hollywood Video, Ethan?
No, and I think I was barely alive once Blockbuster started to die out. I don't think no, I've never been to a Hollywood Video or really a Blockbuster for that matter. Growing up, there was a chain called Dimple Records around my my general vicinity, and I would just when I would get my $20 allowance, I just spend it all on DVDs at that store.
So that makes sense. I wondered because you have that on your letterbox. It says R.I.P. Dimple Records, and I didn't know what that meant until now.
Yep. 2018, they closed down, and 4 years later, I'm still salty about it.
I've got to say, look, I love streaming. I love the accessibility of movies
Yeah.
now, but there's something about walking through a place that has DVDs and just like window shopping and looking at
Yeah.
movie, covers that I will
Yeah.
forever miss. And
If there's one, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
If I was gonna say, if there's one thing that could convince people that physical media is still important, it's special features. If you're like a film buff, I mean, take Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me for example. They released a couple years ago. They released Twin Peaks: The Missing Pieces, which is deleted scenes of Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. And I mean, if there was no such thing as physical media, we really wouldn't be getting that. Which I feel like people just denounce physical media when in reality it is still an important part of consuming film and TV.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why, like, where Criterion was able to kind of bridge the gap and fill the void, because that's something they do really well, is those special features.
Oh, absolutely.
So the film by Rob Zombie is House of a Thousand Corpses. Have you seen this one, Ethan?
I have, yes.
Thoughts, feelings, concerns, and how disturbing do you find this one to be?
It's okay. It tries a little too hard to be disturbing.
Yeah.
It's very similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, obviously, because Rob Zombie, I believe, is a big fan and has highlighted House of a Thousand Corpses as a major influence. Because the clown, what's his name? I don't remember the clown's name.
Uh, I can't remember his name.
Hold on. But yeah, It's okay. It tries a little too hard to be creepy and disturbing, and in some aspects it very much is. But like some of the moments are just kind of stupid to me, and I just his name is Captain Spaulding, and the actor his name is Sid Haig.
Mm.
Yeah.
He is he was a character that I liked. I did like the clown.
Hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
and in some of the vignettes of like, you know, Dr. Satan, that was a neat little character.
Yeah.
Some of the comedy elements worked for me, but yeah,
Also,
go ahead, sorry.
no, I'm sorry I keep cutting you off so quickly. Also, it's a great prequel to the American version of The Office.
Exactly. That is Dwight Schrute's origin story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Rain, because Rainn Wilson's in it.
Also, who it's the guy who did I can't he does Talking Dead. Do you know it's the other male good guy, I guess protagonist. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it's like though like Rainn Wilson and that guy to be in this film is it's like
Yeah.
it's a head scratcher, but
It's like Crispin Glover in Friday Part 4. Because it was a year before he did Back to the Future, which is hilarious. And he was just as stupid looking.
oh god, he's the one. He went on David Letterman and was like
Yeah,
doing karate
and
kicks, right?
and nearly kicked David in the face. Yeah.
That's a great way to do any interview. Just kick the interviewer in the face.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, in part 4, he's got the amazing dance number with Lionheart. Amazing.
Oh gosh. Next movie. I think you might have seen this one, just because of how, I guess, you know, internet famous it is, and that is Creep. And I would be very interested to hear how you like this one if you've seen it.
I have not actually. I have not seen Creep.
So, you know, I watched this one and I liked the original after I saw it, and then I heard some criticisms, and I did start to kind of empathize with them or you know see their perspective. So, you know, I really don't know if it would be up your alley. I think it is neat the way that they go about it, because it's kind of more from the perspective of the serial killer, which it's been done before. I mean, we have a portrait of Henry Lee Lucas.
Yeah, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah, and then I mean, I think there's Dogtooth does that as well. And to be fair, I have not seen those two movies. I just am aware of that. You know, it follows their perspective, but Creep is obviously inspired by that narrative. But it's definitely one to check out because I think it might be polarizing, and I would be interested to hear your take. Next movie, and I believe we talked about this, and I can't quite remember if you've seen it or not, and that is Julian Donkey Boy.
What?
It is the Harmony Korine movie.
I have never heard of that movie in my life.
So it is a Dogma 95 movie.
Oh.
It is you know, it has, and I don't have the names in front of me and I'm totally blanking on them, but it has the one who he I think was dating for a while. If you've seen Harmony Korine, she's in Kids. She's in, I'm blanking on the other movie that he did. That's Gumbo. She's in Gumbo. And then the kind of the main character who the title is inspired by, I think he is Spud in Trainspotting.
Oh, wow. I forget the name of the actor, but he's also Archie in Naked.
Okay. Which character? Oh yeah, he was the drugged out guy on the streets.
Yes.
Okay, so he definitely channels a similar vein from that to play Julian Donkey Boy. He plays a character who is, I don't know if they had said he is diagnosed, but he is portraying a character with schizophrenia, and he does a very good job at doing so.
Yeah. I've only seen one Dogma 95 film, and it was The Celebration, the very first Dogma 95. Love that
Such a
movie.
great movie, yes.
Fantastic movie. I love Thomas Vinterberg. Love him. The Hunt is one of my favorite movies ever. Another Round is also fantastic.
That, and I have to watch
The
that
Hunt.
as well.
Yeah. Oh gosh, such great movies. But yeah, I didn't realize there was a Dogma 95. I'll definitely have to watch it now. That's
And
for sure.
not okay, so if you thought the graininess of The Celebration was bad, for whatever reason, Harmony Korine decided to use like an even worse camera. Like
He did Spring Breakers and Beach Bum. That's why it sounded familiar.
Harmony Korine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a character for sure. Also kind of tying into, we were talking about the one David Letterman appearance. Harmony Korine has 3 really good David Letterman interviews, and he also is or was banned from David Letterman for allegedly stealing from, I think it was like Martha Stewart's purse in the green room. So just a little bit of a fun fact. I'm not sure if it was Martha Stewart, but it was like a pretty big name, and they were like, just get out of here and never come back.
Well, somebody had to do it. She stole from the government.
Yeah, exactly. It's fair game.
Yeah.
Next movie we both watched and both reviewed, and it is a short film about killing, and
Yep.
2 very distinct scenes really stand out in this film as far as disturbing.
Well, yeah, I think we could both go on record saying I love it. There was like a month of my time where I've had to think about Decalogue quite a bit.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's just a fantastic movie.
Next film, and this one is one of the higher rated ones for me, and it is in a different vein, no pun intended, than some of these films as far as how it gets to the disturbing aspect, and that is Requiem for a Dream. Have you seen this? Did you like this, and how do you feel?
Yes, I liked it, but not as much as everyone else.
Understandable.
This movie is like one of the most highly regarded as far as like drug movies.
Mm-hmm.
I far prefer Train Spotting. Train Spotting is one of my favorites of all time.
Such a good movie.
Yes. But I like it because of its energy and because it's able to balance its tone of comedy and disturbing nature so well. Requiem for a Dream, it just feels like it's trying so hard to be disturbing and sad.
Yeah. It really pounds on the depressing drum. Very, very, very effective as far as like a PSA goes. While keeping the entertainment value there, but it's gonna wear on you just how depressing it is, and the ending is just one of the most depressing endings of all time.
Yes. I think I was more depressed. If I was more depressed by anything, but it was Ellen Burstyn, who
Yes.
I love. So here's the thing: it's that that movie has 2 of my who are in my opinion 2 of the most overrated actors in the entire film industry, in the form of Jared Leto and
Demi
I
Moore?
forgot her name. No, not Demi Moore. Jennifer Connelly. Sorry.
Okay,
Jennifer
that's
Connelly.
my mistake because I thought that they look alike. But yes, you are correct, Jennifer Connelly. Sorry about that.
That's okay. But Ellen Burstyn's in the film, and she's fantastic as she's always been. Just playing somebody who desperately wants her to be like her old self, but just has to resort to drugs to doing so. I thought her downfall was better realized and more tragic than everybody
Oh
else's.
my god, I know. Yes, absolutely. Because yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And it was like that was terrifying because it wasn't the way and the manner that she slipped into it was like I think you could relate to it and it was like man like that you didn't really see it coming, I guess.
Yeah.
And very yeah, that was horrific.
Yeah. I love Ellen Burstyn so much. The Exorcist and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Just phenomenal performances.
The next film on the list, you might have seen. If you don't, you might be familiar with I guess the villain character, and that is Terrifier.
I have not.
So the clown character is somewhat iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of middling. Some people might have seen him. I will say the actor who plays him super good as far as like histrionics and facial expressions. But I would recommend it. It is a little bit over the top in the gore factor, but it's a little bit of a popcorn movie, but it's still disturbing at the same time. Next film, and we actually referenced this, but I think you might have said no. You have seen Saw. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I've seen Saw.
Thoughts, feelings, and the Disturbia factor.
I like the movie a lot. I like the mystery aspect of it. It definitely has the best trap in the entire franchise, which is the reverse bear trap, and kind of
Yes.
the effect that it has. Interesting nature of that trap is I like that a lot. Cary Elwes tries very hard to hide his British accent. He almost has it, but I don't think he can pull it off. Lee Winnell does great. I think he was the best acting aspect of the film. He plays a very, very interesting character.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird, like looking back on that now, like with time in mind, it's not quite as disturbing as I think when I first watched it, but still, I think it's a staple and kind of a must-have on the list. The next one, I think fits really well, but is maybe a bit of a surprise because it's not really the horror genre like the majority of these, but I think it's still the tragedy of it is what makes it fit so well, and that is the original Passion of Joan of Arc.
Yes. Maybe my favorite silent film. It's between that and Metropolis. One of the greatest performances in the history of cinema in the form of Maria Falconetti. She is stunning in every sense of the word. Her performance is so far ahead of its time as far as emotion. Yeah, it's just a magnificent piece of early film.
Yeah, and it's so impactful that
Yeah.
I mean it really just pulls full force on the heartstrings that it's
Yeah.
such a sad movie.
Yeah. I would also recommend Carl Theodor Dreyer's other films, Or Debt. and the other one vampire or vampire. I
Ooh,
don't like
yes.
I don't like vampire that much, but I think the atmosphere is really palpable. I really like the atmosphere of that movie. Don't like much else about it. Ordette is a very interesting religious journey about this family with like completely different characters, and I like that movie a lot. But both of those pale in comparison to Joan of Arc.
Am I correct? Is Vampire, is that the introduction of Nosferatu?
No, Nosferatu
Okay, okay.
was like a decade earlier. Well, you're talking about like a prequel in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. Is that
Mm.
character in Vampire?
No, no,
Okay,
I don't
okay,
think so.
okay. Well, I'll have to check it out for
Yeah.
sure. I don't know why I thought that. I think I just got them mixed up.
Uh, it's like it feels like a German expressionist film, even though it's I think Danish. Yeah, Danish. It's either Danish or Swedish.
Okay. What's one of the Scandinavian countries?
Yeah,
The next one, I'm pretty sure you have said that you are a fan of. That is Audition.
big fan of. Love it. Favorite Takashi Miike. I've seen a couple of them. I would also recommend Ichi the Killer and 13 Assassins.
I am Ichi the Killer is one that is high on my list. I remember people saying that that film was disturbing. And let me ask you, is it like grotesquely disturbing, or is it not so disturbing that it might impact the enjoyment of the film?
In a couple of ways, yes, but Ichi the Killer is actually a manga adaptation.
Okay.
I think from like '98, uh, and it is very manga like in that the some of the gore is so over the top, crazy, and there's some CGI in it. It's really bad, but I think that it lends to the cult aspect of the film.
Well, you have me sold on that. Because I do. Would it be like comparable to like Tarantino esque violence, or just like completely in a different ballpark?
I mean, I'm just gonna. I'm not without giving too much away. There is one scene that is very over the top violent and very disturbing. Um, but I wouldn't call it a Tarantino movie. I would definitely not call it a Tarantino movie because it's so. Tarantino takes these cult films and makes them into more big bombastic films,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Takashi Miike takes like just like horror concepts and makes them into his own weird indie cult style.
Mm. Well, Ethan, this list would be incomplete without this entry. I'm not sure if you have seen it or not, and if you have not seen it, I'm not going to be the one to recommend it, but I'm sure you are aware and familiar with it nonetheless, and that is the Human Centipede. Have you seen it, and what are your thoughts if you have?
Heard it's one of the most, pretty much one of the most infamous as far as gore porn, I guess. I don't know if it's as infamous as like a Serbian film.
Yeah,
Um,
it might be more popular with American audiences, but I
yes.
think as far as infamy goes, I think a Serbian film takes the cake as far as how far it goes, which is
Yeah. Yeah. I just, yeah, it feels like a cannibal, not a cannibal Holocaust situation, but like a standard gore porn. To me, Cannibal Holocaust is like everything I hate about movies wrapped into one.
mhm.
Uh, like needless, useless violence. Have you seen Cannibal Holocaust?
So. Yes, I saw that like while I was in high school.
Yes,
So
same. never want to watch it ever again.
Yeah, it's not high on my list. It's kind of something that it has built up such a name value to where a lot of people recognize the title, and like that's how it perpetuates its viewing. But I don't
Yeah.
think it's something that is like it's not really worth a rewatch, like you said.
Yeah. That is one of only two movies that I would say I have a very strict, I have a very, not strict, I have a very set in stone rule of separating the art from the artist. No matter how bad the person is, it is not going to affect the way I look at art. It might be a way I affect, like, trying to like watch it like in terms of like supporting it as far as like monetary stuff goes. Yeah, obviously I don't want to support them, but in terms of like the art, I just view it from the art. Like any Roman Polanski movie, for example, Chinatown and The Pianist are two of my favorite films of all time. And I know Roman Polanski is a horrible piece of crap, but I don't like want to crap on those movies just because he did something really bad that had nothing to do with the movies that he made. But there's two exceptions to that rule: Cannibal Holocaust and Cuties. That just takes it too far, and that is like real world sexuality and violence put into this movie for exploitation reasons, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, and I think you maintain your kind of your perspective, even disliking those films, because it crosses the line where now it has infiltrated the film. If
Yeah.
Roman Polanski's lifestyle like made it into his films, I think you would feel a similar way, because now life has bled into art, and now you literally can't separate the two. So I
Well,
totally
yeah,
see where you're coming from.
for most people, yeah, but like I I'm not going to dislike Chinatown because obviously I don't dislike Chinatown because I'm making a 3-part series about it. But I'm not going to dislike Chinatown and dismiss it because of something that he did that was completely that had nothing to do with the movie. It had seemingly nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Which, by the way, we mentioned Ethan's channel. It is down below. Definitely check it out. Your first video was amazing, and I'm waiting to watch Chinatown before watching part 2, which is out now. So if you've seen the film,
Yes.
definitely go and watch that video, because they are very good videos, Ethan. I have to say, I very much, super impressed by the editing. The script is tremendous and really, really thoughtful analysis. So, guys,
Thanks.
if you are a fan of Chinatown, or if you want to see Chinatown, definitely start with part 1, and then if that doesn't, possess you to go watch it, I don't know what will, because it is a great movie, and the analysis is absolutely tremendous.
Appreciate it.
Next film, Ethan, I believe you have seen. I think the director is Gus Van Sant, and the movie is Elephant. Have you seen this, and thoughts or feelings?
No, I have not. I've only seen one Gus Van Sant, and it was Good Will Hunting.
And I will say, it is shocking that such a feel-good movie like Good Will Hunting has the same director as Elephant, because it's a sad. It is a movie about a school shooting, and
Yes.
very much inspired by the Columbine shootings, and great creative direction. And I think it would be tough viewing for most people.
Yeah, one good comparison to it that I have seen is Denis Villeneuve's Polytechnic, which is about the École Polytechnique massacre that happened in the early 2000s, I believe, and it's all about just that yeah, obviously that horrible part in time. for Canada, and yeah, that's like the Canadian version of Elephant, which is based off of Columbine.
I have heard about Polytechnic, and Denis Villeneuve is such a good director. Would you
Oh,
recommend it? And this is going to be hard for you to answer, just because you haven't seen Elephant yet. But just from a theoretical standpoint, do you think having watched one film that kind of is able to deliver the message about these scenarios, that it is worth watching another film that is in the same vein as that?
um, for your first question, I would recommend it. It's probably my least favorite Denis Villeneuve, just because it's less uh meticulous than his other films, and I think his other films are a little more uh interesting as far as like the filmmaking. But I think the subject matter is very important. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I do recommend Polytechnic, especially if you watched Elephant.
Okay.
And yeah, I would say, to answer your second question, yeah, I think watching both of them simultaneously will give you a perfect perspective of two different, very, very tragic moments, and how each culture captures those moments. Because there's the American side where quite, because during Columbine, there wasn't a lot of shootings, obviously. It was 1999. The movie was made in '03 before Virginia Tech, which was even more deadly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I think that was the turning point where times have now changed, and we see far too much of that often here in America. Whereas in Polytechnic, I don't know how bad it is over in Canada. I would assume it's not nearly as bad. Gun crimes, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Gun crimes are not nearly as bad as they are here in America. So to see that and the way Villeneuve captures that is interesting.
That is a
And
definitely
the way,
that's a good take, and you know, reason to watch it, I would say. I think you cut out, Ethan. Are you still there?
oh, yeah. I stepped away from the mic for a second.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, but I mean that's definitely an inspiration to watch it, and I'm glad you kind of broke it down like that, because that does make it something that I am going to definitely try to seek out in the future. So, moving on to the next movie. This is a Von Trier movie, and it is The House That Jack Built. And if I'm correct, I think you have not seen this movie.
Yep, I've seen three Von Trier movies. Uh, Two of them I mentioned, Dancer in the Dark and Breaking the Waves, and then I've seen Europa.
Mm.
I'm currently like in the middle of watching Dogville. I haven't finished it yet. But House of Jack Bill has been on my list for a bit.
I would recommend it.
Hmm.
And I think I rated it too harshly on my first viewing, so I actually am going to likely watch it again and see if it changes my rating. But the lead actor is absolutely tremendous. I've heard some criticisms of Von Trier on this project, but there is some shocking elements to it, obviously, because you've witnessed Von Trier, and like you
Hmm.
said, he pushes depression pretty well in Dancer in the Dark, like you said. But
Yeah,
here, I think, is where he takes violence and kind of pushes the envelope as far as that
yeah,
goes.
yeah. I've heard it's one of his more like um, polarizingly just like darkly funny movies. Like there's some
Hmm.
dark comedy.
Yes, very very dark comedy, but nonetheless, and it kind of progresses from a more, and this word I don't think fits quite well, especially with the subject matter, but a whimsical take on serial killing, which is not a sentence I think I'll be saying anytime in the future. And then takes it to like a more gritty, like the true depravity and like darkness that is the act. So it's an interesting juxtaposition. So I do think you will really like that, and that you might find yourself laughing more than you would have expected coming in.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely need to watch it.
The next one, and I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't seen it. I believe it's an Eli Roth movie, and it is directly inspired by Cannibal Holocaust, and that is the Green Inferno. Have you seen this?
No, and if it is, I'll hate it. No. Well, I mean, there's some like if there's real, like if it has anything to like with as far as like real animal killings, which is what happens in Cannibal Holocaust, then I'll hate it. But if it doesn't, then maybe I'll check it out.
So I don't believe there is any real animal slaughtering.
Then again, I don't think you can get away with it in 2013. The Cannibal Holocaust was the 80s.
Yeah. But it's disturbing because it's very grotesquely gory and violent, but it also suffers from, you could say it's a bit of a vapid film in that it's like just purely, it's very one note in its themes, and it just is kind of torture porn. So, I wouldn't highly recommend it, nor would I recommend the next film, which is also an Eli Roth film, and that is Hostel. And this is kind of a holding spot for Hostel 1, 2, and 3, and I think I have seen all 3. So it's really, if you're into that, you're into that. I didn't mind gore whatsoever, but I think there's a lot more interesting ways to go about them, and I think Eli Roth misses that from time to time. Cabin Fever was one of the films that, as a cult classic, I do understand, because it did a way better job than Green Inferno and Hostel in doing what it seeked out to do. But, Hostel, that kind of xenophobic message and like using that as a fear and horror element is it's unique, but maybe that you could have added more subtext or nuance to it, I think.
Yeah. Xenophobic. Whoa. I was like, what the hell?
Next film, I would not be surprised in the least if you've never heard of this movie at all. And it is called Black Metal Veins. Have you heard of this film? It's a documentary.
No, but it sounds interesting.
This one is, one of the hardest movies to watch. The fact that it's a documentary makes it so, I guess, horrific. It is a documentary about heroin abuse within this kind of group of friends, and the director, you may have heard of the director, and if you haven't, I also wouldn't be surprised, but the director's name is Lucifer Valentine. Have you ever heard of this director?
No. That is a great name, though.
So I'm going to look up the title because I don't want to butcher this, because you will think I'm making up the name of one of his films. But it shows people overdosing it shows, explicit sexual behavior.
Yeah, I'm looking at his letterbox right now. I'm just gonna throw a couple of these out there, unless you want to throw them out there.
You feel free, because people might not believe it if I say some of the names of these films.
Oh yeah, yeah, and these and on Letterboxd they have these amazing covers, and I'm saying that completely ironically. Slaughtered Vomit Dolls,
Yes.
Regurgitated Sacrifice,
Yes.
Slow Torture Puke Chamber.
So there's a recurring theme here, as you can see.
Yes, and it, judging by the covers, it seems that Black Metal Veins is his film that seems the least like something that you would find on LiveLeak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much, it is like that. But you're following these characters, and you're just getting like legitimate, like they're shooting up in scenes. A number of the cast passes away from, bad drug deals gone bad, or overdoses, and it's just like it's like the move or the TV show Intervention turned up to 11, because like there is no salvation like in your sights. It's just like this guy is just documenting it, and he's not like, all right, we're gonna get you help in 90 days. It's like he's just there to get footage and bounce, like, so.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think one of the happy endings, and I'm saying that completely ironically, is that one of the people tries to hang himself, which leads to him getting hospitalized in a mental ward. But I think, it actually, you have to get clean when you go and are hospitalized for that. So it's like the guy might have a chance, but the way that he gets there is like the most depressing thing ever.
This episode has gone in some dark places. Wow.
Yeah, I think, if you tuned in and you were like, yeah, I think this episode will be a little bit, depressing or disturbing. We took it all the way here.
Yeah.
So there are two more films left, and I feel like you probably have seen both, or if not at least one of these films. The next one is Dogtooth. Have you seen this, and what are your thoughts?
I have seen Dogtooth. I'm a big fan of Yorgos Lanthimos, and it's definitely his most disturbing, I would say. Well, Killing of the Sacred Deer goes to some really dark places as well. I'd say that is not only his darkest, but probably my favorite of his. Mm-hmm. But Dogtooth is very disturbing, as it just how disturbing these kids have grown to be is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I would agree. Killing of a Sacred Deer is that's my favorite as well. And
I've not seen The Favorite.
I haven't either, but I it's gotten just like super good reviews, so I'm definitely gonna have to eventually check that one out.
Same, yeah.
And last but not least, it is a Michelle Haneke movie. And if you've seen either version, because I think it's the same movie, whether it is in French or American, and that movie, of course, is Funny Games.
I just want to correct you. I'm sorry. It's in Austrian.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why. I think it's because I assume Michelle Haneke is a French name. I think that's why I mix that up every time. But yes, you're absolutely correct. Yeah.
But no, Mikhail Haneke is a filmmaker that I've been trying to get into. I've been trying to watch like Cache before I watch any of his other movies, but I've only seen Funny Games. And what an appropriate way to end this list of wonderful horror movies with a movie that I think is very similar to Martyrs, but I love a lot.
Yes. It's I totally see where you're coming from, and I think a lot of the detractions from Martyrs, Hanukkah was able to do correctly.
Yeah, it nailed subverting expectations, which is what Martyrs is trying to do, but I think that does it exponentially better in a very disturbing way as well.
And the antagonists are just, I mean, I think adding like a style of charisma to them is what makes it like you said, it subverts the expectations even more, and it it kind of it leaves you in like this weird gray area where it's like you hate them, but at the same time it's like, as characters they are kind of entertaining too, so it leaves you very, very conflicted.
That scene where he winks at the camera is wonderful.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I definitely want to know what you think of Hanukkah, because he's a guy I'm a little bit scared to watch, because I've heard how absolutely, just depressing and disturbing the piano teacher is. So I've been a little reticent to actually, dive deep into his films. But I would also love to know how you rate Cachet.
Yeah. And I want to bring up a movie that I've had on my mind when I think of Martyrs and when I think of Irreversible. I think of this too, but I think this is one of the most disturbing horror films I've ever seen. But it does it so well. It's called, have you heard of Angst? German film.
Yes, I have. But I have not seen it yet.
I love it a lot just because it is so simple, and yet it is so effective in its filmmaking. If anybody wants to get a good version, for lack of a better word, of Irreversible and Martyrs, I think Angst, obviously, but also Funny Games. Angst is more like Irreversible, in a sense that it's very simple, but it's very disturbing in a realistic way.
Well, that will definitely be pushed up the watch list for sure. That's my list of disturbing movies, and I'm glad we got to chat about them, Ethan.
Yeah.
I think this was definitely a cool exercise. I was glad to get your take on a lot of these movies, and I loved the discussion about Martyrs and Irreversible as well. And it's, it is harder to find kind of an audience for discussion for those films, just because a lot of people won't touch them with a 10-foot pole, and for good reason. I understand.
Yes.
Not movies for everyone, and that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I look forward to our next film discussion, Ethan. Is there anything at the top of your mind that you want to, I guess, suggest for the next episode, or do you want to brainstorm before putting anything on the docket?
The latter. I don't have anything, so we could brainstorm, and the next one could be a surprise.
Ooh, a surprise for the audience. I
yes.
like it.
We haven't had that in a while.
Exactly. So, guys, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you liking and subscribing. This will also be on Spotify. I recently figured out how to do that. So, yeah, Ethan, believe it or not, you are on Spotify now.
Let's go.
Yeah, so check those out. We got the Theo Angelopoulos video is on there. I believe Decalogue is on there. Our last video, what was our last? David Lynch is on there.
Yes.
So definitely check those out. And if you are, listening to this and just want to listen, the audio is on Spotify. So check that out. And also watch Ethan's videos on YouTube. They are great. It is about Roman Polanski's masterpiece that is Chinatown, and I am definitely going to watch that as soon as I can so I can watch your videos, Ethan, because the first one was so damn good. Everyone, be sure to check him out. Give him a like, give him a subscription, and check out his Letterboxd as well, which is down in the description below. I appreciate you coming on, Ethan. This was an absolutely tremendous discussion.
It will always be my pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And we will catch you on the Flippity Floop. Bye, y'all.